Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Behind the Visual, where I speak to all those people responsible for all those things you see out in the world every single day. I am your host and lifestyle and advertising photographer, Mark Hansen. And today, my guest is Leann Arthur. She is currently the art director at Rotary International, which, yes, they're international. And I always thought Rotary was Club was kind of like a national thing, but they are international and they're all over the world. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about where she got to go most recently for a shoot, which is all the way on the other side of the world. She'll talk about that a little bit. We'll talk about how she got started, how she went from basically starting out as a dancer for a large portion of her younger life before she made it to college, and then also started picking up the camera to be a photographer. So we talk about all that and how that kind of came into her job working for newspapers, then eventually for a cruise line, and then things she covered that she never thought she'd cover for anything before. Those are some kind of cool stories. And we talk about what she does now and how that went around or goes well, went around. Say, let's start out how that happened and what she does and how much she enjoys it. And we also will talk about an odd prop request that she got on a shoot that she had to make happen in a very short period of time and how she did that. So stay tuned for this one. I think you're going to love it. And let me know what you think. Like it, subscribe, share it, all that kind of stuff. And I look forward to hearing what you guys think. Want to start?
Sounds good. Yeah,
Well, thank you, first of all, for doing this.
of
I
course.
really
Yeah, I'm
appreciate
excited
you
to be
being on
here.
here. Um, let's start with telling me, like, what was life growing up like? Where did you grow up? What was it like? Were you, creative when you were a kid? That kind of thing.
I grew up in Charleston, West Virginia. So I'm from Appalachia originally. And growing up in West Virginia, honestly, my childhood was pretty idyllic. Like when I think of the memories that I have from being a kid, it's really centered around, hanging out outside, climbing trees. We went camping, we went hiking. My dad had a small boat and we would go out on the lake in the summer, I'd water ski, go tubing. So
Oh,
it's just,
nice.
it was a fun place to grow up if you liked being outdoors and just, kind of was cool with a bit of a slower paced life compared to a city.
Yeah.
But I was always pretty creative growing up. My parents, I think they were as well in their own ways. Like my mom was a sewer. She's
All right.
amazing with her hands. She would sew clothes for me. I mean, she sewed a dress for one of my high school dances
Oh,
from,
cool.
sewed it from scratch. So I grew up kind of, watching her be creative with like these concepts that she had for different outfits, and she'd go get patterns and fabric and stuff at the fabric store.
Was
So
she do
that was,
her own like sketches and that kind of thing to come up with things, or was it something where she kind of saw something and like, I want to make this?
yeah, it was kind of more like I think she would see something, or she would
Okay.
maybe see something in a magazine and she kind of wanted to like emulate it. I
Yeah.
don't really remember her ever being a big sketcher, but the process I think was always really cool to me.
Mhm.
Seeing her have these ideas or just want to try sewing a different type of outfit to challenge herself was really cool. And my dad is working class. He was really good with his hands, so he would fix stuff around the house,
Yeah.
and he was always very handy. And I have a lot of memories of him doing stuff with his hands, whether it was like fixing a car or just doing something fun around the house, tinkering. So that was
Okay.
kind of the gist of the creative aspects of my early childhood.
So I saw from your LinkedIn that you did photography. When
Hmm.
did photography or kick in? Like at what point did you pick up a camera for the first time and start shooting and think this is pretty cool? I'd like to do this for a little while.
It was in high school. I got a point and shoot
Mhm.
for, digital point and shoot. This was early 2000s. Got a point and shoot for Christmas. I think I had asked my parents, for that as like my one big Christmas gift. So I got a point and shoot. And I just really kind of started messing around with it. Like I would photograph, different things when we would go downtown or go to the mall. I would photograph little landscapes, just things that kind of were interesting to me. And I think it was when I was in either 10th or 11th grade, I submitted a photo that I had taken to a newspaper photography contest. It was just the local newspaper in the town that I lived in. And I won, I can't remember if it was second or first place, but I placed.
Oh, wow.
And the prize was to have your photo printed in the newspaper, which, as like a 15 or 16-year-old, that was really
Oh,
cool.
yeah.
And I got a cash sum. I think it was like $200 or $300. So I was like,
Oh, cool.
wow, that was really reinforcing to me that it's something that you can do and be creative with, but also, maybe make it a little more than your hobby. So
Yeah.
that was really my initial experience with photography. It was high school.
So when did you go past the point and shoot and get into
Oh, that's a good
other
question.
cameras?
I think that when I went to college at that point, I had really only just done a little bit of dabbling in film. I
Mhm.
think I got a film camera from a thrift store or secondhand store or something and just kind of messed around with it. I remember doing that a lot the summer before I went to college. But when I entered college, I I was not majoring in anything creative. I actually initially majored in psychology, and I
Okay.
was really kind of confused about what I wanted to do. I was really interested in liberal arts. I was like, do I want to do, maybe philosophy or anthropology or something, because I was very interested in just, I was very curious about the
Yeah.
world, to be honest. So I decided on psychology. And then about 2 or 3 months into my college freshman year, I remember I called my mom and I was like, I'm gonna switch my major to journalism. I want to do photojournalism. And she was like, that totally makes sense for you, go for it.
That's
So that
cool.
at that point, I just kind of was really, I remember kind of always reflecting back on the photography thing and just, being interested in art my whole life as well. I decided to major in journalism and just go for it. So
All right. Did you draw? Were you like when you were younger, did you draw things or was it just like when the camera showed up, that's when you kind of figured it out?
yeah, I definitely was a drawer, a painter. My mom had me in art classes a few times when I was
Okay.
growing up. But really, my first creative love was dance. I went to a magnet school for performing arts
Oh, wow.
in Charleston, and I was really focused on dance up until I went away to college. So that was a big creative constant for me throughout most of my childhood. I started dancing when I was, I think, like 8 or 9.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So what made you decide not to continue like with the dance thing since you went to an art school and you were dancing? What made you not decide like, hey, I want to continue being a dancer and go to New York or go to wherever?
Honestly, I think I was always pretty realistic with the place that dance held in my life. I really liked doing it and I liked being focused on one thing and having this really cool creative endeavor. But yeah, I never really thought that pursuing dance professionally would be uh, obviously not a lucrative career, but I also remember thinking like, oh, it's extremely cutthroat. It's not realistic for me to go for this. And I was interested in other sides of creativity as well. So I kind of decided to, push the dance thing aside. And, I knew that eventually that chapter would close in my life.
Right. So you decided not to do dance because it was too difficult and cutthroat, so you moved to photography.
Right. Which makes total sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So Canon or Nikon, which was your first camera? Or is it
My
something different?
Good question. Yeah, my first camera was a Nikon. The first
Okay.
like DSLR that I owned personally was a Nikon. I now have a Canon for my personal camera. I switched like right after college, right before I started trying to do a little bit of freelance. Totally switched systems at that point, but my first ever camera was a Nikon.
What made you switch?
I honestly can't even remember, Mark. At this point, that was so many years ago. I think it may have just come down to maybe I found a good deal on a
Yeah.
Canon DSLR body and was like, well, I'll make the switch, it's more cost effective. But I don't ever think I felt super tied to Nikon at that
Right.
point. So I just made the switch, and I don't really fall into either camp. I think there's, strong points about each type of camera.
The only thing that irritates me is that I don't know who came first, whether Canon was first or Nikon was first, but that everything is reversed. Like when you put the lenses on, it's reversed.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know
Yeah.
why they can't have, put the lenses on the same, the focus, all, zoom in and zoom out,
Hmm.
all opposite of each other, which is a little
Yeah.
annoying.
Yeah.
But what are you gonna do? I
Yeah.
shoot Nikon, but it's only because I started off shooting Pentax, like my first camera ever, like when I was 11 or 12,
Hmm.
whatever it was a Pentax that my dad gave me, like an old camera of his. And then I started shooting Nikons just because I think he had a Nikon and it's like, I'm just upgraded. So here to have my old Nikon.
Yeah.
And from that point, I just shot Nikons. But
Nice.
I can't really tell a big difference other than maybe the coloring, the temperature of the images when they come out of the camera. It seems
Yeah.
like Nikon's a little more red than Canon, but
Yeah, I've noticed that too. I mean, that's really the only slight giveaway that I've noticed. I feel like some imagery from Nikon is it's a little warmer, but I edit large numbers of images on a regular basis, and
yeah.
I could, if you put a Canon and a Nikon photo up on the screen side by side, I would not be able to tell which one was which
Oh yeah.
without looking in the metadata. So they're both great.
And by the time I finished taking it through Photoshop, you can't tell anyway because I've tweaked all the colors anyhow, made it warmer, made it cooler, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So you changed to photojournalism as your major in college, is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, so what was your first job out of school? Did you just get to a newspaper or something like that, or did you just start freelancing, or how did it work out?
Kind of both, to be honest. I mean, I graduated deep in the middle of the Great Recession, in the late early or sorry, the late 2000s.
Hmm.
And there weren't a lot of jobs. Newspapers were experiencing a big shift at that point, for sure. I mean, print media was changing. So when I first got out of college, I freelanced for the local newspaper in my hometown where I grew up in Charleston. And I also had a couple different odd jobs. And then that fall, I got a full-time job at a newspaper in Beckley, West Virginia,
Hmm.
it's in southern West Virginia. It's about an hour and a half from where I grew up in Charleston. Pretty small, mid-sized daily paper. And that was my first, real job
Yeah.
as a photojournalist.
So with that first real job, that first little time you started out shooting, what was your favorite assignment at that point? So what assignment did you get like, oh, this is cool. Now I might really enjoy this job kind of a thing.
That's a good question. I mean, I initially was put on the sports beat. I
Uh-huh.
would photograph high school football, high school basketball. I'd do basketball tournaments in general, and I really liked that beat. The hours were really challenging as someone
Uh-huh.
in their early 20s. It was kind of hard to have a social life because you were working. I think I had a schedule that was akin to like 11 a.m. to like 8 p.m. or something like
Oh
that,
yeah.
or maybe like I started in the afternoon and then I would finish pretty late at night. But I remember I got to a point shooting sports events where I kind of realized like there's always something going on. It's not even just the action, the
Mhm.
sporting event that you're shooting. It's sometimes in the people that are there that have come out to support the kids who are playing the sports. It's the things that happen before or after, or kind of the in between moments. So I really kind of eventually started to really value that time that I had. And it's also like interesting, I think, to shoot a sporting event because you do kind of have some downtime. In the
Oh
middle,
yeah.
it's like it's kind of like a build up, and then you shoot the action, and then you have a little bit of downtime, and then you do it all over again. So it was an interesting pace, I think, to me.
Yeah, I think you're right about the in-between stuff too, because my daughters used to play volleyball, so I would shoot all their volleyball. And when I was in school, I would shot same kind of thing when I was in college and when I was in high school, I would shoot football games, that kind of thing. But I noticed that I would get once I was shooting all the action, I got to a point where, okay, I've shot this play, this shot multiple times. What else is there
Yeah,
to shoot? And the next thing I know, I'm like shooting the guys or the girls on the bench. I'm shooting them tying their shoes. I'm shooting, everything kind of in between the not on the court, not on the field kind of stuff, which I actually
exactly.
like as much or more than the stuff when they're actually playing a lot of times.
Absolutely.
Because
Yeah,
unless you
that's
catch
super
something really
relatable.
cool, it's just kind of like, all right, it's another shot of like a dude running the ball, you know,
Yeah.
or the girl digging a ball on the court. But then if you
Hmm.
caught some, there are a couple of shots I like that I've got, but yeah, I like that in between stuff as well.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I also had to do a lot of feature hunting
Yeah.
for that job as well. Where the photographers would just be sent out sometimes on a day to just drive around and find a feature photo, find something that was worth taking a photo of that we could, potentially run on the front page or run
Really?
elsewhere. Yeah. I don't know if that's really still common in news coverage, but it certainly was for, a small to mid-sized paper like the one that I worked at in that era. But yeah, that I think really taught me a lot about photography and also just about like perspective in general, and how to solve a problem, because so often it's like, I was presented with this problem where it's like, we need art for the front page and we need you to find a photo that's worth being on the front page. So go see what you can find. So kind of like story hunting teaches you a
Yeah.
lot.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So was there how did that go when you did it? Were there times where you say got in your car and drove and within 30 minutes you found a shot and you're like, this is amazing, got it. And then other days where you drove around for 8 hours before you and didn't find anything kind of a thing?
It really varied. Yeah. I mean, I have memories of, yeah, finding a shot pretty near the news office, within an hour or two. And then other days where I ended up 2 hours away from the office,
Oh
looking
wow.
for stuff. So it really was like, it's kind of like you have to be able to manage your own time, but you also have to have that eye. And I think hunting for those feature photos really did help me initially just kind of start to craft an eye for something that is worth being viewed and that makes for a good story.
I'm sure. Did you have to come back with something? Was
Yeah,
there
I mean that was pretty much the assignment. You have to find something, or there were some times where multiple staff photographers would go out and have the same assignment, and it was kind of like whichever one gets back first or has the one that fits in the space the best
right?
will run. But yeah, oftentimes it assigned to me, so I felt like, yeah, there was that pressure and time crunch to get
I'm
the
sure.
shot.
But at the same time, made sure you couldn't just go sit in your car or go hang out at the pool all day long and then like, oh,
Right.
couldn't find anything today. I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Try again tomorrow.
Hmm.
So when you got out of school, did you have, say, a goal in mind of what you wanted to do as far as your career went? Because I know like when I always wanted to shoot rock bands.
Hmm.
And then I got to a point where I was like, I don't know, I'd like to be in Vogue. I don't do anything even close to fashion photography anymore, other than the little catalog stuff we were talking about earlier, before we came on here. But so those were like my two goals, like to shoot bands or to shoot fashion at a high level. But I never moved to New York, so there was no way that was going to happen. So, but did you come out of school with an idea in your head of what you would want to do? Maybe if you had like if you could just immediately go into a career, this is what I would want it to be, kind of a thing.
I think for me, coming out of school, I just wanted to shoot.
Yeah.
I really wanted to get paid to shoot. I wanted to, be able to photograph every day, make new imagery every day. That was really what I think my main goal was. And yeah, I mean, of course, I've taken, a number of different paths since then, but
Yeah.
they all kind of have led back to photography, of course. But I think that was my initial big goal.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you hit it.
Yeah.
You're shooting for the newspaper, and that's very, very cool.
Yeah.
So, at what point did you decide to move on, or at least add something else other than photography into your professional life?
Well, I worked a couple of different jobs outside of photojournalism. Once I
Okay.
decided to kind of exit the photojournalism world, I worked for a small photography business, like a local photography business at one point.
What were
And
you
then
shooting for that?
for that, I was doing a lot of portraiture.
Yeah.
So just, portraits, seniors, etc. That was only for a couple of years though. And then after that, I moved on to work at a creative agency.
Okay.
And so at that point, I had relocated to Seattle. And I worked for a creative agency, and I did initially retouching, some just general production stuff. We had some catalogs at that point. We had like the Pottery Barn catalog and
Wow.
a couple other catalog accounts. So I initially did more catalog work, and then eventually I moved into the studio and I did product photography.
Okay.
So I did product photography for our Nike ID account,
Oh, cool.
photograph shoes. I did also, that was when I initially started, really for the first time, started styling and doing, what I now know is, of course, like set dressing and,
Hmm.
any sort of photo styling in general. So I got exposed to that as well. And that really kind of really piqued my interest into, art direction and that side of the photo world.
That's very cool. So what made you go to Seattle?
I moved to Washington with my now husband. He was in
Okay.
grad school. So at that point, when he started grad school, when he got into grad school in Washington, I was kind of like, well, yeah, I had always been interested in leaving West Virginia, and either moving to maybe the West Coast or somewhere like Colorado. I
Okay.
had wanted to get out and experience living somewhere else at one point. So that was kind of a perfect opportunity for me to do so.
All right.
So yeah, it worked out. I lived in Seattle for about 6 years.
Oh, cool. Did you like
Yeah,
it?
I did. Yeah. It's quite gray in the winter.
Yeah.
I mean, as you may have heard,
Yeah, I've
but
heard.
yeah, it's a beautiful city. It's probably the most beautiful city that I'll ever live in. I mean, the access to nature is amazing. That scratched a big itch for me, being able to just, wake up on a Saturday morning and decide to go hiking and just
Oh,
drive an
that's cool.
hour and you're in the mountains, in the Cascade Mountains. So that really,
Yeah.
that felt really nice to me to have that as part of my life, especially growing up in the mountains. But yeah, it was a good experience.
I've only been there maybe twice, but both times it was basically I flew in and then I had to drive somewhere else. So I
Oh
didn't really
yeah.
get to experience. I think maybe I experienced the Harley Davidson store in
Hmm.
Seattle, and that was about it.
Yeah.
And then I heard somebody said that I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. They said that we actually get more rain than Seattle, but Seattle has like a constant mist kind of a thing going on. So it just
Exactly.
seems like you
Yeah.
get more rain than everywhere else because it's just a continuous flow of gray and mist, I guess.
That is the general thing that I would hear from people when I lived there. I remember people saying, like, oh, Washington, D.C. gets more rain than we do, or New York City gets more rain than Seattle. And yeah, I totally believe it. Yeah, because it is more of a constant mist. Although there were a couple of years when I was there that I don't really remember it raining that much. It was
Yeah.
just very, very gray. Like
Uh,
you really didn't see the sun sometimes for months. So it was the gray and the overcast, and just the lack of sunlight because it gets dark quite early in
yeah.
the afternoon there in the winter time. So
I had to shoot. I think I was either Washington or Oregon. I can't remember. But I remember I was shooting and it was maybe November. And I just
mhm.
kept waiting for the sun to get straight up overhead. And it never did. And I was just
Yeah,
like, that was
that
just,
tracks.
yeah. So it never got all the way overhead. And I think the sun set at 4 or something like that. So we were having to like
Yeah.
haul through the shots. Yeah.
Hmm.
So that
Yeah,
was
that was very much how it
interesting.
is in Seattle. Yeah, it would get dark. Yeah, around 4 p.m. in the winter. I remember, yeah, I have tons of memories of regularly driving home from work at, 5:30 p.m. and it's pitch black. So
Yeah. Wow.
yeah, it's rough. But
Yes.
yeah, lovely place otherwise, especially if you're into nature.
Yeah, it seemed very cool. Yeah, just what little bit I saw of it. And then I got to drive up and down the coast. I think I had like uh, 3/4 of a day before my flight took off. So I was down in Oregon and I was driving back up and I got to drive up the coast and it was pretty cool.
That's an awesome drive. I'm so glad you got to experience that. It's lovely
It was a
to
little
drive over the
rainy, so it
coast.
wasn't as nice, but I did get to stop. And there were like tons of sea lions like hanging out down at the bottom. That was pretty cool. So yeah, I enjoyed it.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah,
cool.
I love the Oregon coast. It's so pretty.
Yeah, it was I enjoyed it a lot. Okay, so at what point did you go to Holland America? And did you get to go on a lot of cruises when you had that job for free?
Yeah, great question. I moved to Holland America in I think 2016. That was after I worked for the agency, and I was a shoreside employee, which that's what the employees at cruise lines are referred to if you don't work full time on the ships. You know,
Okay.
if you're back at the corporate office. But yeah, I worked at Holland America for about 3.5 years, and they're headquartered in Seattle. And I did really a lot of content stuff at that job. I didn't do photography when I was there. I would essentially write and create the stories that were told on board the ships,
That's cool.
that were typically about the destinations that the passengers were going to. And then I would go on the ships and do essentially content audits where I would make sure that the content was on brand and that the digital screens were in line with the Holland America brand, and that a lot of just branding was being upheld. But yeah, it was a very interesting job. I'm not sure if it exists anymore at Holland America, to be honest, especially post COVID. I'm not sure what the industry is like, but I had a lovely experience working there, and I did get to travel a fair amount.
That's cool. So when you did the branding thing to make sure everything was, were there ever times where you showed up and you're like, yeah, that's not on brand, or that's the wrong font, or that's the wrong color, or whatever it was?
Yeah, it was a pretty common experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, typically there were some adjustments that were needed when I would visit the ships. But yeah, that was part of the job, and I got to travel for free. It was part of my job for 5 years. I went to South America. I went to the Caribbean. I spent a lot of time in Alaska. Actually, the last like year or two that I worked that job, I was mainly traveling to and from Alaska. I spent many days in Ketchikan, Juneau, etc., Sitka. And sometimes, when you have a little bit of downtime, I was able to go out and explore a little bit and go on shore excursions, or just
That's cool.
see the town and experience it.
That's very cool. Yeah, I was in Anchorage twice, but both times I literally was in town to shoot and then had to turn around and leave.
Oh man, so you
So I
didn't get
didn't,
to see it and experience, like get to stay and take in
I got to
Anchorage?
take in a little bit of Anchorage because at one point I don't remember, maybe we got in the day before. So I had maybe a third of a day, two-thirds of a day or something like that to walk around and kind of check it out. It was really, I mean, the area we were in was pretty. I was walking around seeing a school. I was like, these kids get to go to school and look at this huge mountain covered in snow at the top. And it was a great view, but I'm sure they didn't care. They've seen it so much, like, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I thought it was very cool at the time. But I think the last time I was there, I was leaving and I was leaving from someone's house. So we had been shooting at a house, and the woman and her husband who owned the house, I had a red eye flight I was taking home. So she was going to take me to the airport. So I went out to the truck and I was waiting in the truck and I had like 3 layers plus a jacket. And I'm sitting there in the car. It's like 13, no, it's like 15 below. I think the high was like 13 below for the day.
Wow. So
Yeah. So
you
it's
were
like,
you there in the winter?
yeah. So I was there in
Man.
November and then I went back early December.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm just sitting in the truck, just freezing. This dude is out there at like at least 15 below in jeans and a t-shirt talking to me like it's just a normal night. And his
Yeah.
wife came out and bitched him out and told him to get back in the house and whatever. But I was like, how are you out here not just shaking? But I guess you just get used to it. And
Yeah. You develop a level of hardiness, I think,
yeah,
living in that area of the country.
absolutely. And she showed me a picture of a moose that was in their backyard, and the moose was almost as big as the house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, moose, I've heard you got to watch out for them. They can be sometimes a little scary, and they'll occasionally charge at you. But yeah, I don't remember seeing any moose when I was in Alaska. I did see one in Washington once when I was
Yeah.
driving with one of my friends. And we were coming back from the airport. So we were kind of following each other in our respective cars. And I see her car just like stop in front of me. And then all of a sudden, a split second later, you just see this big figure walk across the road. And I
Oh,
was like,
wow.
oh God, that was a moose. And I'm glad that we didn't hit it because that would have been terrible.
Yeah, that probably would
But
have
yeah,
destroyed your car or
they're
her
they're
car.
they're huge, huge animals, of course, and kind of scary to see at night when you're driving.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, I've never seen one in person. I just saw the pictures and she pointed into the yard where that's where it was. They had a like a ranch style house, so not very tall, but the moose looked like it was probably with his horns, antlers, whatever came up to the top was probably come very close to at least the bottom of the roof line.
Wow.
I mean, that thing was monster size. I couldn't believe it was that big.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've decided that I don't want to live in Alaska though, because
Yeah.
just because the whole sun doesn't set, sun doesn't rise kind of thing, depending on the
I
time.
don't think I could deal with that either. I think it would really weigh pretty heavily on me emotionally, especially in the
Oh,
winter.
yeah.
Because it's like in the summer, it's like, yeah, you have this amazing, long full day of sunlight, but you got to pay it back in the winter. And
Hmm.
yeah, I've heard that the winters there are tough. I mean, because for cruise lines, when you go to northern destinations, you typically stop sailing there in like September or October. So Holland America's cruises to Alaska at the time, usually the last sailing to Alaska was like late September or early October. So that's the closest to winter that I've ever visited Alaska. It was like very very early October, maybe late September, but that still is very much fall in
Oh, I'm
a
sure.
lot of
Yeah.
Alaska. Yeah, you're already getting different colors of the leaves that are changing, and it's still it's very chilly compared to the summers there. But yeah, the sunlight is not quite as dark as it is in the winter at that point.
Yeah. I'd like to do a cruise to Alaska but I don't know if my wife would. My wife hates cold. I mean, she starts
Yeah,
complaining about cold probably sometime this month. She will say that she hates cold, because she can't stand it.
yeah. Well, I mean, the summers in Alaska, from my experience, they do tend to be chilly. You'll get the odd sunny, warm day, maybe in like the 50s.
Okay.
But yeah, in general, you should expect like 40s or 50s in the summer if you go to
That's going to
Alaska.
be a
You'll
hard
definitely
sell.
got a layer. Yeah.
I might have to do that one on my own or something, I'm guessing. So, okay, after Holland America, where'd you go after that?
So I moved to Chicago and eventually worked at Rotary International, which is
Okay.
where I am now. So I've been at Rotary for almost 5 years now.
All right. So what exactly do you do for them?
So I'm an art director, and I currently focus mostly on photography.
Mhm.
I know, when it comes to art direction, there are so many different types of art directors. There are art directors who are more design focused. There are art directors who do, just films, moving imagery.
Yep.
I currently focus on really just photography at Rotary, and we have a small but mighty photo team, and we do essentially all of the photography that we need to commission in house for Rotary.
Okay. So what exactly is Rotary?
Rotary International is it's an international service organization, and it's made up of clubs, local Rotary clubs. We have over 1 million members, and they're actually Rotary clubs on almost every continent, which I did not
Oh,
know
wow. Yeah,
until
I
I worked
bet.
at Rotary.
Yeah.
So our members are spread out literally all over the world. And if you're a member of a Rotary club, it's a service club. You're essentially a volunteer, and you work with your fellow club members to address issues in your community, and you can work on projects big and small. It could be as small as creating a park and you name it after Rotary in your neighborhood, or it could be you apply for a global grant through Rotary and address an issue in a community in another country, and work from the ground up to solve a problem. So there's a lot of different opportunities for projects and service based stuff.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I even saw Rotary International, but it did not click. I still was thinking it's a US thing. I don't even know. The international should have given it away, but
Yeah,
for
well, I
some
think a
reason I
lot of
still thought
people,
US.
yeah, in the US, they just kind of have this idea of, the local Rotary clubs
Hmm.
in American towns. But yeah, we're an international organization, and there are clubs all over the world.
That's crazy. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've heard of Rotary clubs and I knew what they did, but I literally thought, okay, this is like a local just here kind of thing. I don't know that I even realized it was a national, obviously not international thing.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So
Yeah.
5 years,
But
huh?
yeah, 5 years, and there are so many cool opportunities for capturing photos of the work that our members do. So I will work on brand campaigns, a campaign one day, and then another day, I'll be commissioning a photographer for a portrait for Rotary Magazine, because we also have a monthly magazine for
Okay.
Rotary members. So there are a lot of different platforms, that our content goes on, and just a lot of different opportunities for cool photos.
So do you shoot any more with like do you shoot it all with rotary or do you just handle the
No,
photography?
no, just art direction at this point. I do, I enjoy photography still as a hobby. I always take my camera with me when I go on vacation. I like to shoot landscapes for the most part. I find that very, very
Yeah.
soothing and relaxing. But yeah, I don't shoot anymore at this point.
I like shooting landscape some. I don't think I'm as good as it at it as a lot of people. And I realized that very young. We were
Mm-hmm.
in Oregon with my dad, and he pulled over to the side of the road because he saw all these logs in the river. And he pulled down the side of the road, got his camera out, and took some pictures. And all I was doing was sitting there thinking, I'd started shooting by this point, but not a lot. And I was just thinking, what the hell is he shooting? I don't see anything here worth taking a picture of. And then the
Yeah.
pictures came back, and I was like, wow, okay, now I see there was something to take a picture of. But it's just like I'm more of like old buildings and people around old buildings and that kind of thing. That's probably more what I see. And I don't see as much of the landscape unless I'm somewhere totally different. Like if I'm in Italy or if we were in Italy this year and we went to Greece a couple of years ago. And those two places I saw the stuff. I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. That's some stuff
Yeah.
worth shooting. But in general, I kind of wish I had more of that eye to see the landscape stuff. I just don't, I don't know. I just don't for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I find it kind of an interesting way to travel. You take your camera
oh
with
yeah.
you, and for me, when I go on vacation, I tend to like to go places like, Arizona, Hawaii, somewhere that I can
Mhm.
hike and be outside and actually, enjoy the landscape. So
Yeah.
it makes sense to me to kind of take my camera with me and just, capture the interesting perspectives that I see
Have
from
you
my
been to
time
Hawaii?
outside. Yeah, I've been to Hawaii a couple of times. I haven't been since the pandemic though, but it's probably one of my favorite places to travel, just because you can, you literally get the best of both worlds. You get the beach, you can hike in the mountains, there's obviously Honolulu if you want big city amenities. So it's a great place to travel, I think. Have you been before?
No, but we're thinking about going for my daughter's graduation from college in June.
Nice.
So if you had to suggest a place, we're going to go probably week and a half to 2 weeks, I'm guessing. But so if you had to suggest a place to go or multiple islands to go to, what would you do if you had, say, a week and a half in
I would
Hawaii?
say probably start on Oahu. That's of course
Okay.
where Honolulu is. And I've been to Oahu once, and I've been to Maui twice. Maui is really nice if you like kind of like a slower pace, and I mean it's a smaller island as well, so you can kind of like drive the perimeter. I think
Okay.
maybe in like one day. I mean, I haven't driven the entire perimeter of the island before, but that's just what I've heard. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely they're both really beautiful, but I would probably recommend Oahu as a first time traveler to Hawaii, just because yeah, it's where you can easily fly into that airport. You can still get to beautiful beaches, but there's also Honolulu, if you want to spend
Yeah.
a day or two in the city. And there are also plenty of mountainous hikes if you drive
Oh,
about an
cool.
hour or so outside of Honolulu.
Okay. That's good to know because we're trying to
Yeah.
figure out what to do. We told her when my daughters graduate college, like you guys can pick a trip. We'll take you wherever you want to go. And my oldest wanted to go to Greece, so that's why we went to Greece. And my youngest said she wanted to go to Bali. And I was like, that's not happening because your
That's
mother,
really far. Wow.
yeah, my wife, there's no way. She's not going to get on a plane for that long. So I was like, you got
Yeah.
to pick someplace closer. And she just spent she's basically back and forth between Italy at this point because she did study abroad. She found a boy over there. So now she's like every chance she gets, she's back to Italy.
Yeah.
So she's kind of did that thing. She traveled a lot over there. So we've never been to Hawaii. So she was like, how about Hawaii? So I was like, all right. So
Yeah.
we'll give that
Yeah.
a
I
try.
mean, you all will have a blast. It's a great place to visit, and yeah, definitely not as long of a flight as to Bali.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and we may do like a layover in LA for a day or two and take them. They've never been to, Hollywood, which will be a complete disappointment to them. But
Yeah.
they've never, done any of that stuff. So maybe we stop over there and let them have an In-N-Out burger and see the Walk of Fame or something. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. That'll be fun.
Yeah, it'll be good. All right. So what would you say has been your favorite? I don't know, say your favorite job or project since you graduated school.
I mean, to be honest, I feel like I'm still pretty young, so
Yeah.
I don't really have a favorite project that I've worked on yet. I do feel like the projects that I've enjoyed the most kind of all have one thing in common. They're usually pretty centered around story. You know,
Yeah.
whether it's a photo shoot, whether it's a feature film, or even of course all of the different stories that I worked on when I was a photojournalist. I think that that's really what I enjoy. That's the type of work that I enjoy working on the most as an art director.
Was there anything as a photojournalist you had to go shoot and you're just like, I can't even believe this happened?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, because I worked for a newspaper, located in a pretty small town, there definitely were some things that I would go to photograph where it would kind of just be like, oh, I don't really get why we're covering this.
Right.
I remember one time I covered a family reunion. It was a really big family reunion. It was like some sort of like 10 generations or something. Don't quote me on that number, but it
Right.
was like there was some sort of angle to why we were covering the family reunion. And initially I was kind of like, what, why are we covering this for the newspaper? And then I got there and I just saw how joyous everyone that was there was, and literally witnessing three, four, five generations of family members coming together in one place, and thinking like, this is actually really really important to just to document it, as almost like a record keeping
Yeah.
important thing, that the fact that this happened. And of course it's really cool to the family members that I'm there as well, that the paper actually cares about what's happening in the community. So
Did they all have matching t-shirts?
I do
Yeah.
remember that there were some, that were dressed with like they all had like either hats or shirts or something. This was like well over 10 years ago at this point, so I can't remember what exactly it looked like, but they definitely went all out with the swag.
I had a client in Memphis that I shoot for every year. And the hotel I stay in every single because I stay I it's usually a weekend shoot. So when I get there on Friday, I start seeing people, and Saturday, evidently the weekend I'm there is always a big family reunion weekend in Memphis for some reason. Because and they're like people and they all have on the same like matching t-shirts or like you said,
Yeah.
or hats or something like that, all commemorating like the family reunion for that year. I
Hmm.
always thought that was kind of cool that they did that.
Yeah.
And the reason I asked about, if there was anything, my dad, when he was young, he had evidently had a pet pig, and the pig ran away and then came back home, and it made the newspaper somehow.
I love that.
But he also lived at the time he was living in Shiloh, Georgia, which I
Hmm.
think even now they have maybe one stoplight,
Wow.
kind
Yeah.
of that small of a place. Yeah.
Yeah.
The rumor
I would
was,
love to see that article though.
oh, I
Does he
would
have
too.
a
I don't
copy?
think he has it, but he was just he told me about it. But I would love to have seen how they wrote that up and
Yeah.
that kind of
How they
stuff.
photographed it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know, but this also, I mean, this town was so tiny. I think they said the trash truck was also doubled as the police cruiser. So I
Nice.
don't know how true that is, but maybe. All right. So what would you say your dream job would be? Like 10, 15 years from now, and you could be in your dream job or less, 5 years from now, 3 years from now. What would your dream job be?
That's a really tough question. I mean, I really enjoy working on projects where I have to solve a problem.
Hmm.
And, it took me many years to realize that there are a lot of jobs in the creative world that fit into that category. I mean, I definitely think a lot of art direction is solving a problem.
Hmm.
You're working within certain constraints, and you have to consider time, schedule, obviously the creative aspect as well. You're kind of trying to solve a problem and figure out how to execute something. So I mean, I think my dream job really would just be something where I can solve problems and take an idea from a concept to an execution, because I love the production aspect of being an art director.
Have you
I
thought about
like,
being a producer?
yeah, I mean, a lot of what I do as an art director is producing. I mean, I
Okay.
can't speak for other art directors, but the current role that I have, yeah, a lot of the tasks associated with being an art director that aren't the creative tasks
Right.
are very, I think, producer adjacent. It's like sometimes you have to get a permit, you're scheduling, there's back and forth, there's a lot of communication. So yeah, that's definitely, I think, very, very producer related.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't really want to box myself in and come up with just like one dream job.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I obviously love art direction, and I like that you're problem solving, and you have the ability to work on different projects all the time.
So what would you say your favorite thing about your job now would be?
Probably getting to collaborate with a lot of different people. I whether it's me collaborating with just one photographer on a shoot, like a portrait shoot, or a smaller, more self-contained shoot, or photo like collaborating with a photography crew, or a video crew on a larger job. I think that part of art direction is really, really fun to me, and it feels very creatively satisfying, I think, to just collaborate with a bunch of other creative people to just achieve a common goal. It feels really fun, and it's cool to kind of just bounce ideas off of each other, and that's probably one of my favorite parts of the job.
All right. So do you hire photographers and directors from outside the company quite a bit, or is it mostly in-house kind of stuff, and then occasionally you go outside of the in-house people to bring?
Yeah, I do hire photographers who are local to where we are shooting at all the time. I have a pretty big Rolodex at this point, a pretty big
Sure.
network of photographers, many of whom I've hired multiple times for different types of photo assignments. But yeah, we hire local. We have a local contributor model at Rotary, where we really find it very important to hire someone who is local to where we're
Mhm.
photographing, so that we're not just like flying someone in and then leaving. And especially when we're working on projects and we're capturing photos of projects that are a little bit more sensitive in nature. So we try to go local, or at least hire someone that lives within a couple of hours of where the subject is based.
So those types of shoots, do you travel to the location for those shoots, or is that something where you assign it and do it all between like Zoom or on the phone calls and emails and that kind of thing, and they handle it on their own?
A lot of the single day shoots and just individual portrait shoots,
Mhm.
I hire the photographer who's local, and then I produce the shoot remotely. I don't fly in or travel to that location.
Right.
I will travel to be on location for brand campaigns that we do. Those are obviously multi-day shoots.
Yeah.
We're hiring a crew. There are larger budgets as well. So those types of shoots, I will get to travel. But I'd say, yeah, about 75% of the shoots at Rotary that I hire photographers for, I'm hiring them, and they are local, and I'm not flying in to work with them. I work with them remotely.
So how often do you do a brand type shoot?
Usually about once or twice a year.
Okay, so you get to travel once or twice a year then.
Yeah, last year for our brand campaign shoot, I got to go to Melbourne, Australia. So that was really
Nice.
cool. That, of course,
Okay.
speaking of long flights, that was
Yeah.
the longest flight that I'd taken at that point in my life. But it was a great experience. The shoot went really well, and I loved just working with the crew in Melbourne.
That's cool. So do you get to decide where the brand campaigns are shot, where the brand shoots are shot, or is that somebody else? handles that?
Typically, that is on our marketing team to decide.
Okay.
And for the most part, our brand campaigns are shot in the city where our next year's international convention will take place. So we
Okay.
have a big convention every year, typically in May or June, and the city that it takes place in changes every year. So we'll do a big push with this brand campaign to photograph real Rotary members who live in that city. And we'll also capture video and do typically like a 30 or 60 second spot as well. But we'll capture content of them and then push that content out in the lead up to the convention in the
Okay.
city where it's located.
Well, I was hoping maybe you got to pick it out and you could decide, hey, I want to go to this place next year.
That would be ideal. I wish that
Yeah.
that would be an option, but yeah, I mean, the cities that we have our convention in are always really cool, so I can't complain.
All right. Well, that's good. At least you get to go to those. So that's
Yeah,
nice. Yeah.
absolutely.
You get to hang out and actually see things, or do you have to just fly in for the shoot and take off?
Typically, I'll have a little bit of time to walk around, grab dinner, explore a little bit. Just kind of depends on the shoot schedule.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the worst when you get like for me anyway, when I get booked someplace very cool, but I literally have to fly in the next day, scout, next day shoot, and then I have to bolt back out immediately and don't get to see
Yeah.
anything other than location in my
Hmm.
hotel.
Yeah, I've definitely had a couple of shoots like that, and it's kind of a downer when you don't get to really enjoy where you are, but it's still,
Yeah.
I think, cool to be somewhere different for a few days,
Oh, I
change of
agree.
scenery.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so we're running on about 50 minutes. We're about out of time. So I'm going to ask you the last question. So far, what is the strangest or most interesting or coolest thing that you've done? We can go either in your career or just in life in general. So if there's something like really freaky or interesting or just strange that you've seen or done or experienced, or something that's, has happened, whether that's in your life or it's just happened in your career.
I mean, I can think of a few different like strange requests that I've gotten
Yeah.
for shoots. As far as my personal life, I'm pretty straight nosed. I don't really take a lot of risks. I'm not really an adrenaline junkie, so I don't have a lot of crazy stories. I've never skydived. I've traveled some interesting places, but I don't really have any crazy travel stories. So I guess for the sake of the podcast, I'll keep it to like professional requests.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I was working on a shoot once where so I was the art director for a commercial spot, and I just had some really odd requests for props. Like I had to source. It was over 2 dozen props, I think, and I only had about 4 days to do it. And one of the prop requests was I needed to get something very specific that was related to the brand printed out on a very large sheet of paper, like I think like 5 foot by 5 foot. It needed to be essentially large enough to fit in a doorway, just a standard doorway. And we had a very, very limited budget, and of course, large scale printing like that it's very expensive. I mean, more than
Yeah.
anyone. Yeah. So I got on the horn with like 4 or 5 different Chicago based printing shops, at least, probably even more than that. Was just like asking them, can you print this large print job in less than 4 days? Essentially, it was almost like an overnight request at that point. And can you do it for under X amount of dollars? Again, it was very small budget. And I just kept getting told, no, like this is an insane request. There's no way that we could do that. I ended up finding a print shop that would do it. They were able to do it in less than 24 hours, but it was just like one of those moments when you're working in production and you're working in the art department, where it's like, why? Like this is the hardest thing to source in
Yeah.
this very small time frame, and it ended up being a pretty crucial a crucial prop to use in the final cut. But it just was a week of me being just very stressed out and trying to find all these props, and I sourced everything that they needed, but sometimes you just get truly the strangest requests where it's like, this is I love that this is my job. It's
Right.
fun, it's wacky, and I get to do some of the strangest things and call it a job.
Yeah, that sounds about about right. They'll ask you for something almost impossible and say, you have 3, 4 days to make it happen too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And you gotta pull it out.
You got to
So
figure out how to make it happen.
hmm
Yeah, absolutely. That's cool though. I'm glad you like it and you're into it.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like as long as you're into it and enjoy it, you should have a great career. I
Thanks.
would think,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
it should
that's
be
the
lots of
goal.
fun. Yeah. So do you have like a goal at some point to, or do you think you're going to stay in Chicago for a long time?
Yeah, I love Chicago.
Yeah.
I enjoy living here, and the creative industry here is also really great. There are a lot of different opportunities, whether you want to, work for an agency, whether you want to be in-house, if you want to work for a college, if you want to do freelance. I mean, there's a huge and robust freelance production industry here. Obviously, we have a lot of filming and TV that shoots here, but even just like smaller, commercial spots like the one I was describing earlier, or independent feature films. There's just a lot of activity here for production, so I think it's a good place to be.
Yeah. So, and a friend of mine was just telling me that we were talking about like last year, I think he was talking about Chicago. He's like, nobody thinks about Chicago. Everybody thinks New York.
Yeah,
Everybody thinks LA, but nobody thinks Chicago. And there's a lot going on in Chicago.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. So you can stay and you got tons of stuff going on. You don't have to like, oh, I've hit a ceiling. Now I got to go to New York or wherever and live that.
Yeah. I hope it never gets to that point.
Yeah.
I'm confident in the
There are
industry
enough big
here. And
agencies there that if you want to eventually move to an agency or whatever, there are tons of big agencies in Chicago. So there's almost any
absolutely.
reason to have to go to New York.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And when I was in my early 20s, back at the end of college, I definitely had a phase where I thought I wanted to live in New York. And then
yeah.
I just remember kind of like running the numbers for how much money it takes to live there, how much you have to have
Oh,
just to
yeah.
move there and get an apartment. And I was kind of like, I don't know, there's got to be somewhere that's maybe kind of similar to New York in some ways, or has similar amenities, but is much, much cheaper. And
Mhm.
Chicago kind of checks that box for me. It's kind of like a Goldilocks city. You have a lot of the amenities and similarities of New York. Obviously, it is smaller in population, but it's a good bit more affordable than New York.
Yeah, everybody I know who lives there seems to love it. I mean,
Yeah,
the only complaint I've ever heard from anybody is that, sometimes it gets a little too cold in the winter for them. But other than
yeah.
that, everybody loves it.
That's really my only complaint as well. The winters are long and tend to drag on a little
Yeah.
bit. They can be quite cold, although we've had a couple of winters in the last 2 years that were pretty mild, to be honest. But the summers are amazing. I live near Lake Michigan and
Oh,
near a
nice.
beach, so in the summertime I go to the beach a lot and hang out at the lake, and it's great.
That's very cool. And those lakes aren't really lakes. I mean, it's not like a normal lake. That thing's like an
I mean, yeah, I
ocean.
mean you can't even see across. It's
Yeah.
it's a great lake. It's big.
Yeah. I was in Minnesota or Michigan. Can't remember where I was, but I remember seeing a billboard for mosquitoes. Like it was a mosquito sucking on a dude's arm, and
Hmm.
it was like they're not after your blood. It was a liquor ad, and all I was thinking was, why would you do that? Because that makes me not want to buy this liquor because it's going to attract the mosquitoes. And then I got out of the car and saw mosquitoes everywhere, and I was understood the whole ad campaign at that point. That's like you're
Yeah,
not escaping them. And at one point, I drove by one of the lakes, and it was like you said, I couldn't see the other side. I thought this is pretty cool. Now that's a lake. That's a pretty cool lake.
yeah. I mean, Lake Michigan it's beautiful. I mean, I remember when I moved to Chicago from Seattle, a lot of people were like, "Oh, that's not even a lake." Like or they really were kind of comparing it to the Sound or the Pacific Ocean,
Yeah,
near Seattle, and it's like, "Oh, it's a lake." It's not anything like the water here. And then I got here and saw it, and and began living within a few blocks from it, and it's just such a cool thing to have as part of your life. It's a natural body of water, and you can swim
yeah,
in it. You can, do all your different water activities, and it's a beautiful place to kind of sit and reflect.
yeah. That's very cool. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you being on here and doing this and chatting with me and everything. It was very interesting. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, it was great to be here. It was my pleasure. And thanks for chatting.
Absolutely.